All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praises to Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahushai, by Hashem, Rakakwadash, give up honor to the apostles and elders who taught me this truth and sincerity. Also, give blessings to you elect out there that's pushing this truth to the four corners of the globe. And salutations to you, brothers and sisters, that are coming back to the Heavenly Father, which his name is Yahweh, and his only begotten Son, which his name is Yahweh Shash, your brother Kasar, with another quick video. So we were in the midst of breaking down Obadiah, the book of Obadiah. So I left off on verse 7. And here in verse 7, it goes into the allies of Esau and Edom turning against them. And you got to think, like, a lot of America's allies have benefited off of Esau through business, through trade, import, export, you know. So now we ask the question, well, who are Esau and Edom's allies? Okay? So when you get Psalms 83, it tells you, okay? So these are the enemies of Israel. But this couple of verses go into how the enemies of Israel have consulted and came together to cut Israel off from being a nation. So without further ado, let me get it. All right. It says, keep not thou silent, O Yahweh, behold not thy peace, and be not still, O Yahweh. So it's, you know, it's saying, Heavenly Father, do something about this, because look, our enemies are coming up against us. Verse 2 says, for lo, thy enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. So when we get this word tumult, which I believe goes into an agreement. Okay, no, it goes into a murmur, a noise, a cry, a rage, a sound. All right. So, they're angry. The other nations are like, hey, we got to do something. All right. So they lifted up their head means, they're Israel's enemies are rising up. Then verse 3, they have taken a crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against the hidden ones. All right. So they consulted. All right. They came together, they congregated and said, hey, look, this is what we gonna do. We got to take these people out of power. All right. We got to get them to sin. We gotta blot out their name. It says, for they have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may no more be in remembrance. Now, why does this apply to the Obadiah? All right. Just giving a little context of what's going on, because when you jump to verse 5 on down all the way to verse 8, it lets you know. So it says, for they have consulted together with one consent, they are confederate against thee. All right. So it says the tabernacle of Edom. All right. So that's Edom is our number one enemy. And notice this first, because in the book of Obadiah, there's a whole book dedicated of giving Esau his judgment. All right. And the Ishmaelites and Moab and the Hagarees and Gabal and Ammon, Amalek, the Philistines and the inhabitants of Tyre, which some of these are, Moab is the Chinese, Ammon is the Japanese, Amalek is the head tribe of Esau and Edom. The Philistines are the Hamites, which are Africans, and Tyre, I think, is a tribe of the Philistines. And then you got Ashur. I'm not sure who they are, but I think the Hagrians and Gabal are tribes of, let's see, I gotta, but the point, my main point is going into Esau and Edom, really. It's, let's see, people, Philistine, tribes, roommate war, okay. But anyway, so these are the enemies, all right? Now, further research will have to be done on who Gabaa and the Hagareans are, and going into verse 8, Ashur. But anyway, the point still stands, okay? When we go back to Obadiah, you see that where it goes into, also too, when you go to get an updated version of that, because now things have changed. At that particular time, all the nations had came against us, because the scriptures speak about how they all had a hand in our affliction. All right, but when you fast forward, when you go to, let me see, Revelation 17, okay? When you go to Revelation 17, it goes into the other nations turning against America, okay? And then I believe Revelations 12, where it goes into the 10 horns, basically the 10 horns, which make up NATO and the EU. You got, I'm just going to throw some out there. France, Great Britain, England, basically all European-led countries, okay? Prominent European-led countries, because really America has so many ties to Great Britain, so back in the day when America was trying to get its independence from Great Britain, they fabricated a story, but scholars, when you actually do the research, some say that we never really got our independence from Great Britain, and there's a lot of research on that, because you got your hidden District of Columbia, that's its own little country, or doing its own little thing, which has ties to Great Britain. Like, it's so many ways you can go with this, but basically, to sum it all up, NATO and the EU. So let's do a quick Google search. Who makes up NATO and the EU? So NATO countries. Let's go into it. What are NATO countries? You got Belgium. Here they are right here. So as you can see on my screen as I'm scrolling down, those make up NATO countries. You got Germany, France, Finland, Denmark, Norway. I'm just naming some. Spain, Sweden, Turkey, United Kingdom, and of course at the bottom, United States. Now, EU, let's look up EU countries. EU countries. Here it is right here. So, you got the EU countries: Australia, Belgium, some of these I'm not even going to try to read. Denmark, Finland, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Ireland, Italy, Slovenia, Luxembourg, Portugal, Romania, Sweden, Spain, yada, yada, yada. So the NATO and the EU are connected. So, as you can see, yeah. So, out of 27 EU member states, 22 are also members of NATO. So, you see, like, we can, hey, that's the mic drop right there. Okay? But so now going back into Revelations 17, because what's going to happen is some of those countries that are allied with the U.S. are going to turn against the U.S. So when we go into Revelation 17, it touches on that. All right. Okay. So as the header says, the great prostitute. And the reason why America is known as that great prostitute, because America leads all of those other countries in certain things like philosophy, culture, just to get some examples. You know, America tries to mimic, other countries try to mimic the NBA. All right, this is just an example, so people can understand, because I know I've been rambling on a lot, but a lot of countries adopted and tried to come up with their own leagues. All right, this is just something quick and simple. Or like democracy, a lot of countries have adopted democracy. A lot of countries have adopted the three-piece suit. Doing business, a three-piece suit. Normally back in the day, countries would wear their own garments, but now to do business with Esau and Edom here in America, they have adopted some of their customs. The whole world really has adopted the customs of Esau and Edom, or you would want to say America. All right, because this is the modern day Egypt. All right, which is referenced in Isaiah 19. Though it mentions Egypt, but it's talking about America, because during when Isaiah was prophesying, Egypt was already taken out of power at that time. So anyway, Revelation 17:1 says, and there came out of 7 angels which had 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, come hither, I will show unto you the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. All right. So that's speaking about America, the judgment of America, basically. So then the many waters, well, not in because sometimes waters is synonymous with people. Let me see. I think it's referenced. That part is referenced at the end. Well, anyway, I don't want to get too far off topic, so I'm just going to keep it simple and keep it brief. All right. But anyway, so that verse 1 is speaking about America. Verse 2, it says, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, because the other elites of this of the other nations, the top presidents, ambassadors, elected officials have been in leagues with, because they made that tumult, they have been in leagues with America. Like in different countries, Jesus Christ is being pushed. That's a form of spiritual fornication. But yeah, just to keep it simple, says the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So they've made the other inhabitants of the earth, these other nations, have been drunk with the philosophies of America. All right. And then when you keep going, it goes into it goes into, like, for instance, that golden cup, which goes in that, because America is known as that golden cup. All right. But also too, that cup is synonymous with judgment. All right. Because when you go back to Obadiah, which that's what we're about to do, let's go back. So on Obadiah, so you get the point. You know, we went into the NATO and the EU thing. You get the point. These other nations are going to set their nukes, fire nukes off at this place. All right. And the book of Obadiah goes into that. So where we at? At verse 8 says, shall I not in that day, saith Yahweh, even destroy the wise men of Edom and understanding out of the mount of Esau. So, you know, the wise men of Edom, because, see, Esau thinks at this point that he cannot lose with his technology, with his advancements in warfare, you know, not just with military warfare, but also too biological warfare, with his grip on the economic world in general. Speaking about the dollar, you know, the dollar still runs the world's currency. The dollar's still at the top of the world's currency. So Esau has a grip on the world, you know, economically, spiritually, and physically, you know, through his military. Even though we know that these things are dying down, these things are being weakened over time by the Heavenly Father, Yahweh Shem Shai, you know. So, you know, you kind of see what's really going on. But anyway, yeah. So the Heavenly Father is they're not gonna understand. They're not gonna see this coming. All right. They're gonna be so prideful, because it speaks about that earlier in the chapter. Their pride will deceive them. They're gonna be so prideful in this time when this takes place that they're not gonna see this coming. Verse 9 says, and thy mighty men, O Teman, shall be dismayed, to the end that every one of the mount of Esau may be cut off by slaughter. See? So they're going to be caught off guard. All right? And then when all of this happens, they're going to be scared. You know, that slaughter is going to come. You know, think about how someone feels when they're about to be put to death. You know, the fear that comes over you, you know. And then verse 10 goes into why. You know, it says, for thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. Now, this is not speaking about the Jacob and Esau story. That's not what this is talking about. All right. This is talking about two nations that have been in constant turmoil with each other. Mainly Esau against Jacob. Anyway, we know who Jacob is. I mean, we know who Esau is, a so-called white man. And the Jacob is the so-called African Americans, Latinos, and Negroes that live in this. I mean, I said Salakia. The so-called Native Americans and Negroes, or you would say African Americans, and Latinos, or you would say Mexicans or Ephraim, that live here. All right. Well, across the globe, really, you know, the four corners of the earth, because we understand that our people spread across the four corners of the globe. But you got to think, atrocities have been done in various countries that our people are in as well. So this violence perpetuated throughout time, over and over and over. You know, this one nation, Esau and Edom, you got to throw Amalek in there, that have a constant hatred and violence against the children of Israel. All right. So, you can't get it misconstrued. It's because in the Jacob and Esau story, when you go back to that, they came back to get, they got cool again. And then they went their separate ways. So this is not talking about that. All right. Verse 11 says, in the day that thou stoodest on the other side. All right, Salakia, I'm gonna have to cut this video short. I got a call from work. So I will, without further ado, Shalom.